unless you didn't know I was gone, in which case I'm still here. Yay! I am back from a 3-week long hiatus, 4 weeks, I might be, it's 3 weeks, which was well needed, so thank you so much. I'm excited to announce what I'm calling Season 2, just because it's January and it's easier that way. It'll help me keep track of where I am. So welcome to Season 2 of AmourologyEd. I'm excited to share it all with you, and I'm really excited about where this is going to go. I have some really good ideas and things planned and interviews and all sorts of stuff. If you're interested or passionate about something and want to be interviewed, maybe you have a favorite sex toy, or maybe you have some really good relationship advice, or maybe you just want to talk about yourself a little bit, and you fit into this whole spectrum, then please let me know and we'll make that happen. Thank you so much.
Hey, so I'm in the middle of editing this, and I don't know what's going on with my editing software, but it's mismatching the audio and the video. So if you're watching the videos and it's not synced up, I really, really apologize. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to try to fix it for next time. I just wanted to there's also a dog whining in the background, sorry. But I just wanted to give a disclaimer. If that bothers you, you may want to either walk away from the screen and just listen to it, or just listen to the podcast version of it. Sorry.
Hello, and welcome back to AmourologyEd, where we do sex and alternative lifestyle education. My name is Krista, I'm your host, and today we are going to be talking about queer. So we're going to just move right down along that trajectory of the LGBTQ2IA, and we're going to talk about the Q on the spectrum. Okay, so queer is kind of a funny one because it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. The basic definition is just anything that's odd or quirky or goes against the mainstream or just strange. That isn't really a useful definition for the LGBTQ2IA spectrum. The way that we're going to define it is basically an umbrella term for anybody who is not heterosexual and or cisgender. And I know that includes a lot of things, but that's kind of the point, that it's used in a lot of different ways, and there's actually a lot of contention behind it. This is one that I think has a huge generational difference as well. It was used for a long, long time as something kind of derogatory or negative, or used as like a slang slur type thing. And a lot of the older generations who remember it being used that way have a real problem with it. And it's been kind of picked up by the younger generations and reclaimed, and it's used super frequently by younger generations to mean all sorts of different things. But in general, it's best to ask somebody what their preferences are when using the word, because it can be so different from different people. With its original meaning as strange or peculiar, queer wasn't really used in a derogatory way until the late 19th century, when it was starting to use that negative connotation, that slang term, to be used against same-sex couples. Now, in the late 1980s, queer activists started reclaiming that word to be used as more of a provocative way, or a political radicalization. So a lot of the prominent members of the queer activism communities started using that word again, but there are still a lot of people who find that term very offensive. It wasn't until the early 2000s that queer really became more widely spread and started to take on this umbrella term to mean anything kind of outside of the norm. Now, there's a lot of disparity as far as what outside the norm means, what normal is in the first place, and we could do a whole video on that. But in general, if somebody claims to be queer, I don't like to argue with them. The reclamation of the word itself also is somewhat controversial among the LGBTQ communities. Again, kind of it generally has to do with these generational differences, but a lot of members, both LGBTQ and non-LGBTQ, kind of object to the general use of the term based on the idea that these radicalists, these political radicalists reclaim. A lot of people feel like this political activism that reclaimed the word wasn't really inclusive as well, and that's why it kind of created this division within the community. They think that it divided the community based on things like age and race and gender and class, all things that now kind of are encompassed underneath that queer LGBT umbrella term, but weren't very inclusive to begin with. The divide also got worse during this time because there were a large number of people that just viewed themselves as normal and wanted to be seen as normal. And attaching the word queer, that label, to them, admitted that they were out of the norm. And that's not what they felt like. Now, I think it is important to note that using the word queer as a slur is still used to this day, and that's why some people are still kind of not on board with this reclamation of it. I think that as we get further along in society, it's going to get better, and it is already getting better. A lot of people are viewing this as more of a widespread phenomena, but in the end, it's still a big problem that needs to be addressed. And I think it's also important to note that a lot of people don't necessarily like the word queer because they view it as this hip slang, and that's not really what they're about. They're just people. Now, I know this can get really complicated because, again, it's used in a lot of different ways to describe things like gender and sexuality, or just style of dress. However, I would just challenge you to think of queer as this umbrella term that just means somebody who is going against the mainstream, somebody who is a little bit off the cusp in something that they are doing or describing themselves as that is a little bit strange or quirky or weird. Now, I know this may actually be an unpopular opinion because there are a lot of contentions like whether or not polyamory should be included under this spectrum, or things that naturally do include heterosexual and cis people. I really, really strongly feel like if somebody wants to call themselves queer and they're doing it in a way that's not degrading or minimizing the effect of that for somebody else, great, more power to you. Okay, well, that's our show for today. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to continue right along that trajectory next time. We're going to talk about Two-Spirit next time, which I'm really, really excited to introduce because I think this is a new concept for a lot of people. Also, as always, you can find me at my website at AmourologyEd. You can find me on all social media at AmourologyEd. Okay, I made a decision, again, that I was having a lot of people request to join my group that weren't a part of Patreon after I had closed it to Patreon, and I just felt awful. I hated turning people away, especially for something as petty as funds. And so I reopened my group. It's now, it's still a closed group. You still have to request to join. People in the public can't see what you post in it, but it is open to the public again, to people over the age of 18. So if you would like to join that, it's a wonderful community. Please just request to join and go from there. And then if you would like to support me on Patreon, if this is something that's helpful to you, that is still open, you can find me on Patreon at AmourologyEd. So thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your support.
She was earnest. She was serious. She just really wanted to know anything I would tell. She was curious. She was incredulous. She was searching for her truth, wondering if it would include. She is a 7-year-old woman on a quest to find out if she's in the closet. But first she must know the science behind the show, she says, how do lesbians have sex? She asked me, how do lesbians have sex? She understood how two guys do, but how do lesbians have sex? She threw me off in disbelief, surprised to hear those words, requesting adjectives and verbs. I said I need some time to think, so I ran through my head how to answer that request from a 7-year-old woman on a quest to find out if she's in the closet. But first she must know the science behind the show. She says, how do lesbians have sex? She asked me, how do lesbians have sex? She understood how two guys do, but how do lesbians have sex? So I thought it all through, decided that I must answer and not put it off. What I said blew her mind. She just could not believe what people are doing these days. She's a 70-year-old woman on a quest to find out if she's in the closet. But first she must know the science behind the show. She says, how do lesbians have sex? She asked me, how do lesbians have sex? She understood very well how two guys do, but how do lesbians have sex? It might sound funny, but really it's kind of creepy. How do lesbians have sex? One more time for good measure. How do lesbians have sex? One more time for fun. How do lesbians have sex?